Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's the scariest situation you've ever been in? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I broke 3 of my husband's ribs. I would do it again at any time because I saved his life with chest compressions. He fell over in our kitchen at the time, dead, no heartbeat, no breathing. In Germany, everyone who gets a driver's license has to take a first aid course. I remembered everything from the course, and I functioned like a robot. The ambulance came after 3 minutes and took over. He's alive and is doing well. The fear that I suppressed at that moment unfortunately caught up with me later. Getting hit by a Jeep while walking across the street. It took a few years to not have an anxiety attack crossing the street if a car was even on the same street I was on. My ex blacked out drunk, screaming in my face while I held our crying baby. I kept him off me by wielding a pathetic folding knife at him and fled out into the snow with nothing and walked the street sobbing. A nice man pulled over and sat with us for a while and offered to help for me to sit in his car for a little while. But I was so scared of men at that point that I just sat on the curb holding my baby. His mother eventually came and let me sleep at her place for a few days. My dumbass went back and was there for 3.5 more years. Not even the worst thing he did to me, just the scariest. I slept with a mace and knife in my bra. I had an if I go missing or die file for my family. Never ever again. I was in Darwin, Australia a few years ago. I was staying at this hostel by the beach, the most beautiful place I've ever slept at, by the way. If you look for it, you'll certainly find it. I can't recommend it more. Together with a couple of friends I met at the hostel, we decided to walk on the beach toward the nearest shop to have some ice cream and grocery, something like a mile away. It was around 4 p.m.-ish when we left the hostel. We walked peacefully the distance and stayed at the shop for not more than 30 minutes. On our way back, we took it more slowly, enjoying the view and whatnot. All of a sudden, in front of us, there's no beach anymore. I initially thought that we took the wrong turn somewhere, but it was plain impossible, as the beach is only one, of course. I turned back, and from our disbelief, there was no beach anymore there either. It was as if it would disappeared in front of us. Of course, the tide was rising up. For Aussie people, it is obvious. Less so for a stupid, neo-graduated guy at the opposite side of the world who had never seen the effect of the rising tide. Well, in front of us, there was nothing but a patch of mangroves, blocking the only piece of sand still walkable. It was like 6 to 8 meters wide and ended up in the water. There was no other option. We run toward it. As I lifted a branch of a mangrove to help the 2 friends lass through, 2 females, I still believe in chivalry, I suddenly remembered the other reason why it was so dangerous to swim there, in addition to the currents: crocodiles. And what do you think was there, amidst the leaves and branches not far from me, while I was keeping the branch lifted? Well, a hell of a big fat croc, probably looking at me from that very, very short distance. Those fellas are famous for being able to jump, if I remember correctly. Well, the first thing that came to my mind at the very moment was a strange sense of quiet, and then the first page of a newspaper with title, "Stupid Tourist Eaten Alive by Croc Because He Was Stupid," with my parents reading it. Well, that guy did not move for the sake of God, and somehow, I don't remember the exact steps, we made it to the other side of the mangroves and managed to use the last bit of sand that remained to get back to the hostel. When we arrived, we burst into hysterical laughter, and we never spoke about it for the rest of the trip. Man, was I stupid and lucky. My husband was out of town, and I woke up to a man standing at the foot of my bed. I thought to myself calmly, so this is how I die. I forgot that I had dragged my elliptical trainer into the bedroom to make room for more shit in the living room. A jacket draped over gym equipment makes for an ominous figure. Last December, I was driving home when suddenly I started having tunnel vision and felt like my chest was empty. I pushed the ECG button on my Apple Watch. I pulled over and asked my wife to drive me to the fire station. My heart rate was about 230 beats per minute, and I was in sustained ventricular tachycardia for over 3 minutes before my rhythm returned to normal. I didn't lose consciousness, but I felt like I was standing on the edge of oblivion. I ended up with a pacemaker and no explanation why I'm still alive. Scary. There's these artificial rapids near where I live that people go down in inner tubes. Some people go down without a tube. You just have to be a very strong swimmer. Apparently I overestimated myself. I got caught right in the rapid and couldn't break free. I clawed my way to the surface and just got a gasp of air. Then I was taken back under and didn't come back up until I was out of the rapids. Water is scary. A guy flipped out on me and my dad at the checkout line in the grocery store. I was asking my dad if we forgot anything, and the guy in front of us flipped out on us. I guess he thought we said something to him. Anyway, he storms out, swearing at us. We just brush it off. He was waiting outside for us in his Dodge Challenger and tried to run us over twice. We just barely managed to get back inside the store. We begged the employees to call the police. They tell us it's not our responsibility. If someone was trying to kill you, then you call the cops. We haven't been back to that store since. When I was 11, the house across the street from me caught fire. It was a fast-moving electrical fire. The boy who lived there was 14 and he had a 9-year-old sister. All of our parents worked full-time, so we were latchkey kids. This was in the early 90s. Anyway, the boy came hauling ass down the street screaming for any adult to come out and help because his house was on fire and he thought his little sister was in there. I was the only one who heard him, so I grabbed his hand and ran into my house and called 911. He wanted to run into the burning house to find his sister, and I knew he would die if he did. I was a scrawny, spindly little girl, 5'6" and maybe 75 pounds, and he played defense on the football team at 5'8" and probably 150 to 170. He was panicking and sobbing and thrashing around, but somehow I found the strength to physically hold him back until my little sister could run down the street to find an actual adult. I guess it's adrenaline or something. All I knew was that the only thing standing between that kid and a horrible death was me. The good news is that his sister wasn't in the house after all. She had gone to a friend's house without telling him, but for about 15 minutes, we were sure she was in there burning, and I had to stop him from burning with her. I've been in other scary situations since then, but because of how young we were, that one stands out. I was in a car accident with my dad once. Actually, I've been in like 4 with him. But we were waiting at a red light when it finally turned green. We started to go forward, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a van coming from the right that looked like it was going too fast to stop at its red light. I shouted, "Oh my God," because there was really nothing else I could do as a passenger, and my dad slammed on the brakes, making us run into the side of the van. It still kind of shakes both of us, because if I hadn't called out, my dad wouldn't have broken, and it would have been hit instead of us hitting the van that was going 45 miles per hour. My ex used to beat me up. This one time he was coked out, threw me in his car, and proceeded to race, zipping in between cars and swerving all over the road to the middle of nowhere, where he then beat my face off the dashboard till my nose and tongue were bleeding, forced me to do coke, and told me he was going to kill me and leave my body in the woods. This was about 1.5 years ago, and I still remember it as clear as day and have the occasional nightmare. And read stories like this and you say to yourself, like, how could you put up with that? You don't take it in context. Hopefully you didn't go back to him and you stayed free of personalities like that. I didn't know it in the moment, but I definitely almost drowned once. I wasn't wearing my glasses, and I must have gotten caught in a current because I was trying to swim to shore, but I wasn't making any progress. I was a good swimmer, but it was getting dark, and I already couldn't see well without my glasses. I got tired and just started floating on my back, thinking, what do I do? But I wasn't really scared. Then a random dude on a jet ski saw me and gave me a ride back to the beach house. He almost certainly saved my life, but I didn't even realize how bad it was until like years later. I was 18, and this was at a high school graduation party. Another time that I was very scared in the moment was when my ex-husband had some kind of psychosis and threatened to kill me with a knife, then put the knife down and grabbed his mom's giant marble urn and held it over my head, saying he was going to bash my face in. Then he calmed down and asked me to hold his hand while he fell asleep. I did, and I cried the whole time. Then, when I was sure he was asleep, I took my dog and got the F out. I was tasked with repairing a light that was 80 feet in the air at a baseball field. My company had rented a 110-foot boom lift to give me access to the light. The ground was soft from rain the night before. I called my boss and told him this was a bad idea, that the lift was too heavy. He told me to call the client and clear it with them. I called them, and they agreed that all responsibility would be theirs if I attempted the work anyway. I told my boss, and he told me to get it done. I went up and was repairing the light when I happened to look at the railing of the lift. It was not parallel with the horizon. I was 80 feet up, and this thing was slowly tipping over. I started to bring it down, a very slow process, knowing that at any moment it may tip past the alarm point and take my ability to control it away, a safety feature on these lifts. I made it down, but had I not looked at the railing, I likely would have died that day. The lift was buried in the ground. The customer tried to pull it out with a tractor, but it broke their chain. I called the tow company, waited for hours, and they showed up and told me they didn't have equipment capable of getting it out of the ground. I waited for more hours for another tow company who had to bury anchors in the nearby asphalt to pull this thing out. Total working hours that day on this job, 16. Total near bun deaths, 1. We're going to need a lot of context for this one. When I was in 7th grade, I went to a new school, so I didn't know anyone. I saw this kid alone, and he was disabled, or at least I thought he was. The thing is, I started talking to him and getting other people to do so. Mostly my brother, since I didn't have many friends. At first, he seemed like a quirky, nerdy kid. I've been calling him a kid, but honestly, he looked like an adult. But as I got to know him better, I realized why he was alone. The fact is that he harassed every girl and told them he liked them. Not even teachers or little kids would be safe. I heard him talking about how a 3rd grader was hot, but he started picking me out the most of everyone. He would talk weird to me. He would make it so teachers would pair us up with groups. For text to the point that I asked a teacher if I could do the project alone because my friends were already packed up and he scared me. She thankfully said yes, and he also told me some disturbing things, like how he stabbed his cousin and that he had a girlfriend and did witchcraft on her so she would never leave him. The worst thing he did around the end of the school year. We were in the lunch line, and we were pretty close to each other, and he started rubbing his thing against me and touching me. I told him to stop and back off, but he refused. A guy that was ahead of me, and was my friend, traded places with me. You may ask where the principal was during all of this. She was well aware of his behavior, but she let him continue because he was disabled, which is really creepy considering that her daughter was my classmate and one of the teachers was also her daughter. She only took matters into her own hands after my mom threatened her, and she didn't even say anything. She just made a rule that we would have to stay a meter apart in the lunch line. So in the end, she didn't fix anything. Toss-up between waking up needing to pee while camping and realize that there was a bear outside of our trailer when going to get my dad to take me to the bathroom. Still had to pee. We had to wait for the bear, thankfully a black bear, but I was like 8 to wander off, then walk out into the night to go to the bathrooms, knowing a bear was wandering around. And at the time, I was in a grocery store and armed robbers came in and held up the place. I also happened to be with my dad that time. We had to hide with a bunch of other people back in the storeroom behind the butcher's counter. This is super lame in comparison to most of these stories, but I was going to pick my boyfriend up from the train station after he'd gone to visit his mom. It was a rainy night, and I was driving down a road with a 35 speed limit. I'm not speeding, I'm going 35. But a car pulls out right in front of me. I had to slam on my brakes and hydroplaned a little, but was able to avoid the car, but I swear I thought I was going to die. When I got to the train station and my boyfriend got in the car, he said, "Hey, I missed you," and I just absolutely burst into tears. I couldn't get it together the whole drive home. Later my boyfriend said he thought I had cheated on him or something. LOL. No, just pure adrenaline crash. Was involved in an 8-car wreck at the tip of Florida on the way to Key West. 2 cars smashed together right in front of me, and the car I was in managed to squeak through as they parted without much damage other than flying debris and glass. Cars were on fire. One car had the front ripped right off, and a dead person was in the car. A bloody kid stumbled out of one SUV, and all the other occupants were dead. It was absolutely insane. Being chased by a pit bull without a leash. I was just a kid and was casually at a park during a sunny summer day. The dog started running to me and was panicking, just froze while it was heading toward me, and I don't know if it was from the sudden fear, but I felt my life being replayed in front of me. I had already been bitten by big dogs like German Shepherds previously, so I had a massive trauma. Eventually, I realized I had to do something, so I started running and begging for the owner to stop their dog. They just watched and laughed. To be honest, thinking about it now, I guess it wasn't that serious. Maybe it was funny, but considering the owner had a nozzle in his hand, which he took off the dog, I don't know. I did end up getting bit on my leg and couldn't walk with my left leg for weeks. It would hurt to step on it. I still have a scar from it healing up. I went to the hospital to make sure I didn't catch anything, and as for the owner, I still see him to this day around the neighborhood. Regardless of my last experiences, I love animals so much, and I know that it is the owner's fault and responsibility. The dog is not to blame. As an owner, you should always train and educate your pet, or don't get one at all. I have 2 dogs today, and I love them loads. When my siblings and I were young, my parents were doctors working in a rural area. However, my mother, who is Indian, was met with a lot of racism, and my parents weren't particularly popular for being the only interracial couple in the area. My sister and I were walking home from school one time, and we saw this dude in a pickup truck following us. We were confused, but kept walking. The truck kept following us, though, as we started running. At some point I tripped, and my sister somehow pulled me up with one arm. The truck caught up with us, and we saw the door swing open with a dude reaching out to grab us. At that point, one of our neighbors, Glenn, came outside and grabbed my sister and me to put us behind him. Glenn was 6 feet and a heavy-set fellow, not to be messed with. He told the dude in the truck to keep it moving, and if he saw him in the area again, he'd kick his ass. Glenn took us inside and calmed my sister down, who was hysterically crying. He called our parents and the cops. It turns out the dude in the truck was a disgruntled patient of my mom's and wanted to get revenge by kidnapping her kids. Police found evidence of this too. He was arrested shortly after. We moved right after that incident. It still creeps me out to think about it. Was coming home from work, was on the phone with my boyfriend and took a turn too sharp, causing my drink to fall out of my drink holder and onto the passenger side. So I pull into the parking lot to shake the extra liquid off of my floor mat, rubber so it was possible, when this guy walks up and goes, "Hey, can I get a ride into town?" I said no, but he was standing between me and my driver's side door. I was on the passenger side because my drink spilled on that side, so I had to say yes. Well, I'm just fully uncomfortable, but I ask, "So where in downtown?" He tells me, but as soon as I start heading that way, he goes, "Oh, I actually need to go towards Shelby, next town over." Instantly, alarm bells are going off in my head, but he got me in a spot where no public places are when he starts talking about how he just got out of prison and how women don't look at him how he wants, and started asking me if I thought he was attractive and telling me I had to take him to this house in the middle of nowhere in Shelby. I got the courage to tell him, "No, I don't feel comfortable. I'll take you to Mayhair's, and you're going to have to figure it out from there." He wasn't happy, but I ended up dropping him off by the doors of Mayhair's, so it would be on camera. I hope he didn't get a chance to go in another woman's car. A random young guy pulled a gun on a group of us outside a bar. He was ranting, pointing the gun at us and himself, waving it around, while everyone else slowly went inside. I felt compelled to go talk to him. So I said he seemed like he just wanted to be heard and I'd listen. He was yelling at first, but started talking to me. I learned his mom was very sick and dying. His brother had been shot the day before and died just a few hours earlier. And this kid had recently gotten a scholarship to a small college, but realized he couldn't leave his mom to be the first person in his family to attend college. He was just pissed at the universe. I sat with him on the curb as he started to calm down and just sob. But someone had called the police, and when he heard sirens, he got anxious and ran off. I have no idea what became of him. I hope things worked out, but I realized I was very close to being shot by a stranger for no reason.